on top of the throne with how they're treating people like Glenn Jacobs and Steve Borden, who have been with professional wrestling for forever. You can't keep on treating your legends and your icons, people who built this business, the way that they are, because without these guys, it wouldn't be possible for the New Talent Initiative to even exist in professional wrestling. We would have never heard tell of people like Bo Dallas. We would have never heard tell of people like Daniel Bryan and CM Punk if not for people like Glenn Jacobs and Steve Borden, who built this business from the ground up. And now you're treating these legends and getting away with how you're treating these legends very inappropriately, and it's just unprofessional in my opinion. And that's why I'm deeming the term control freaks people like Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, who find amusement in doing all of this and take up their time by posting things like workout videos on sites like ProWrestling.net. Just the other day I saw a workout video for Stephanie McMahon posting it, I think, at midnight on ProWrestling.net and PW Insider. So that's what they're taking their time up with, apart from making lives miserable in WWE, especially the lives of these legends, and it's really ridiculous. And Kane seems to be their latest victim because Sting kind of comes in and out all the time and is not there all the time to make his life a living hell. They break his neck in the championship match, and here comes Kane, only because, in my opinion, they don't have anybody like Samoa Joe to come in just yet and challenge Seth Rollins for that championship, and obviously they're waiting on someone like Samoa Joe to come in and make something more interesting happen in professional wrestling, because right now it doesn't seem like Kane can do that, and that's why I feel really frustrated, because here's the thing, Kane can do that. He's just not given an opportunity to stand out and do something that fans will talk about for months on end on social media. Right now, Kane has gotten several victories over Seth Rollins, and he stood out a little bit, but not as much as he probably would have if this feud would have been taking place back in 2003, 2004, even in the early 90s when Kane was the most infamous and his character was at his peak. I was more of a Kane fan of the original Masked Kane, the original Unmasked Kane, than I am of this new Unmasked Kane, or this Demon Kane, which is being aptly referred to as by Michael Cole and JBL on commentary for Raw, and then you have Byron Saxton and Jerry Lawler doing the same thing on SmackDown on Thursday nights. So in my opinion, the original Kane is the Kane that I prefer, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels the same way, especially if you're a throwback fan of professional wrestling. You feel the same way I do because you grew up with the Attitude Era, and you grew up with the feuds like Undertaker versus Kane, Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels, The Rock versus Mick Foley. You grew up with all these feuds, and you know how much of a critical influence people like The Rock and Mick Foley and Kane and Undertaker were on this business. How many matches did we see between Kane and Steve Austin, or The Rock and The Undertaker? We saw a lot of matches. I would say hundreds of matches during the Attitude Era trying to get ratings over WCW, which they did do. And this is not the Monday Night War Kane that I remember. This is just a Kane who's kind of just there, and he looks more stupid week in and week out. He's not as terrifying as he was years ago. I remember when people like The Undertaker and Kane would strike fear in the hearts of people between the ages of 7 through 15 years of age. People couldn't stand to talk about The Undertaker and Kane and their history with me, and now Kane is just a laughingstock of WWE. He's either the laughingstock of the WWE or is just kind of just there in whatever role he has. And as the Director of Operations, to be honest with you, I think that's the more appropriate role for Kane to have, because it kind of fits more into the whole angle with the Authority and what's going on with Sting. And I was just getting used to Kane being the Director of Operations. Now having him be both the Director of Operations and the Masked Kane, that's more confusing, which is why I appreciate the stipulation on the Rollins-Kane match, where if Kane lost the Demon Kane, then the corporate Kane would lose his job as the Director of Operations, which leaves that position open as we currently are speaking right now. The thing is, I think that it's more appropriate to keep Kane as the Director of Operations. You didn't need to do that. You didn't need to bring back Kane as the Demon Kane. Obviously, you did it because you didn't have anybody else to come in and challenge Seth Rollins at the time. I appreciate that, but you've only made the storylines more confusing for people to follow, and especially the new generation of wrestling fans who I can't help but feel for during this very pivotal time in professional wrestling. And is this really the direction you want to be heading in with WrestleMania this close, with events like the Royal Rumble and Fastlane coming up and fastly approaching? I might add, if I was the Director of Operations in WWE, the COO, or the Chairman, I wouldn't want this going on. In WWE, I want something more probable to be happening. I want something more unpredictable to be going on, and something actually worth talking about throughout social media. Obviously, Kane has millions of fans out there, and that's why all this frustration is being shown by wrestling fans. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, wrestling does not care about what fans want, because if they cared about what fans wanted, then people like Kane would be champion all the time. We wouldn't see these people like Seth Rollins being given the championship and holding that title for as long as what they do all the time. It's only because people like Seth Rollins are annoying, and that's why people like Seth Rollins and CM Punk always have and always have had found ways to win matches, and that's why people like Kane are never given the benefit of the doubt. And as long as we are in this position we are in currently right now, with professional wrestling, people like Kane and Sting are never going to be given the benefit of the doubt. A good feud probably would have been Kane versus Sting if this would have been 10 years ago, and people are actually mocking that if Sting were to have won the championship from Seth Rollins, then Kane would have came out and chokeslammed Sting, and we would have been looking at a scenario for Hell in a Cell where Kane would have faced Sting for the championship. If that would have been the way that it would have went, that probably would have been stupid too, but if it were 10 years ago, it probably would have made more sense. And now to me, the Undertaker versus Sting match, if it would have happened 10 years ago, probably would have even made more sense, even though people still want to see that as a dream match that people believe is a must for professional wrestling. I still believe it's a must, but 10 years ago it probably would have made more sense than what it does now. Nothing they're doing with Kane nor The Undertaker in 2015 is really making any sense, and I don't blame wrestling fans for feeling the same way that I do about the direction of Kane's character. How can you not be frustrated with what they're doing with Kane's character? I mean, Kane went through so many metamorphoses through the years of professional wrestling. He's been with WWE now as the Kane character for over 17 years, and he's been with WWE under different aliases for over 21 years. He's been the Fake Diesel. He's been the Jerry the King Lawler's Royal Dentist in 1995. He's previously worked with The Undertaker ever before he was Kane, so over 21 years. How much longer can Kane go? He's up in age. The Undertaker, of course, will be 51 years of age, and Kane is not too much far behind or ahead of The Undertaker with age. So how many more years can you actually rely on a Kane character? And if you're Kane, how can you not be frustrated with what they're doing with your character right now after you've done so much in professional wrestling? You've been champion. You've been on top. Obviously, you're at the point in your life where you realize you don't need to be on top as champion anymore, but you still want to be in those main events. I have said that if you were going to retire The Undertaker, Mask Kane, either the Demon Kane or the original Mask Kane, would have been perfect to have against The Undertaker in The Undertaker's final match. Even if you couldn't have Sting face The Undertaker, obviously it's the better choice to have Sting face The Undertaker in The Undertaker's final match. But if you want to talk about a history, nobody has more history with The Undertaker in wrestling than someone like a Kane. The next option to that probably would be Hulk Hogan or Stone Cold Steve Austin, and the possibilities of that happening are virtually impossible. So you could have The Undertaker face Kane in a great match if Kane was his mask character, and you had The Undertaker, of course, in the prime of his life. But now, it's just questionable because Kane is just kind of just there, in my opinion, and he's someone who really isn't serving a purpose in professional wrestling. If he does have a purpose, it's to put over the new talent initiative. And who really wants to see Kane versus Seth Rollins 100 times, or Kane face someone like Bo Dallas? Nobody wants to see that. You want to see the new talent initiative showcased in a way they've never been showcased before, or wrestlers of the past even have been showcased before. Let's face facts. The era of The Rock versus Kane, The Rock versus The Undertaker, Steve Austin versus The Undertaker, Steve Austin versus Mick Foley, that era has long surpassed us, and we've come into an era right now where I don't think characters like Kane are really appropriate. And if a character from Kane is appropriate, it's the director of operations, and obviously they're killing that idea. So where does that leave Kane? It only leaves him in one place, and unfortunately leaving Kane in the dark is not where I want to see Kane. I have had the chance to see Kane perform live. He's a phenomenal performer. He's the definition of consummate. Glenn Jacobs has been with them from the get-go, and that's why I feel for all these Kane fans out there who have your Kane tribute pages, your Kane fan pages. You followed Kane for years, and now we're in a position where Kane's having nothing done with his character. And of all the people you could have challenged Seth Rollins in a phenomenal reign since WrestleMania 31, out of nowhere, here comes Kane. And people are supposed to accept that. People are supposed to buy into the idea that Kane is worthy of being the number one contender for the championship. I'm not saying that Kane isn't worthy for the championship, but halfway through the year, this probably would have made more sense. We're almost to the end of 2015, so to have Kane show up the way that he has and say that he's the number one contender for the championship and have this problem, this so-called problem with Seth Rollins being the champion and the way he conducts himself, I don't buy into that. Halfway through the year it probably would have made more sense, but we're near the end of 2015, coming up on 2016. So much is going on in the way of promising for professional wrestling, and if this were 10 years ago, even halfway through this year, it probably would have made more sense than what it does now, having Kane just show up and say, I'm the number one contender, because Steve Borden now has a neck injury, and it doesn't look like Sting is coming back anytime soon, and Sting versus Undertaker now has to be put on hold for possibly even longer until Sting makes a return, which we don't know when it's going to be. So Kane is just showing up, making up for lost time. I am really frustrated, just as frustrated, if not more than all of you fans are. And I think I speak for every wrestling fan when I say it's time to start listening to wrestling fans and giving wrestling fans what they want. Because if we gave wrestling fans what they wanted, Sting would have came out of Night of Champions as WWE Champion. John Cena would have won the U.S. Championship the way he did, so we got half of what we wanted, and Sting probably wouldn't have broke his neck if he would have given him the championship. That's the sad point of this whole Sting versus Seth Rollins scenario and what's involving Kane now all of a sudden. If Sting would have won the championship and things would have went the way that they did, Sting probably would have not broke his neck, and we'd probably be looking at Sting versus Kane, which by far is a more entertaining angle than Sting or Seth Rollins versus Kane, rather. In my opinion, I think putting the title on Sting would have been a great move. But again, I go back to and reiterate the fact that wrestling doesn't listen to its fans, because if wrestling listened to its fans, wrestling would be a far better place. Wrestling would be more enjoyable to watch, and we'd have more to talk about in the way of something promising going on with the professional wrestling business. But unfortunately, because of the way things are going, we are just frustrated at the end of the day all the time with what's going on with it. And currently, right now, with what they're doing with Kane, I am not really a fan of it. I'm more interested in what's going on with The Undertaker and Brock Lesnar, technically, than what I am with Seth Rollins and Kane. Because to be honest with you, I've seen them in the Authority for what feels like forever, and now having them feud against each other makes no sense at all. Seth Rollins versus Randy Orton earlier this year made more sense than what Kane versus Seth Rollins does again. Kane's just there, in my opinion, filling the void, and he really doesn't need to be in the position that he's in. If he needs to be on television, he should be the director of operations. You should have left that open for Kane to do, kind of fill the void for the Authority, and not have him be both the director of operations and the Demon Kane like we are currently seeing. Kill one of the characters before it's too late, in my opinion, and do something to save Glenn Jacobs, because in my opinion, he deserves a lot better than what he's getting right now. The way he's being treated along with Sting is just really ridiculous. Control freaks, I think, is the only way to determine how the Authority are really conducting themselves, and really the only way of describing the Authority. But I'm going to leave it up to you guys. Do you like Kane and the direction of his character, or do you dislike what they're doing with Kane's character? You can leave it for me in the comments at Jonathan Clarke 22. You can tweet it to me on Twitter at Jonathan Clarke 1, and you can let me know what's up on my Facebook page at HEW Entertainment. At the end of the day, let me just say this. If you're against what they're doing with Kane's character, I can't say that I blame you, and I really appreciate diversity, because I know there are people out there who feel that what they're doing with Kane's character is more promising than what they maybe were doing with his